Hello everyone. Today I will be showing you how to refletch or just straight up fletch a Atlatl dart. Now the reason why I am refletching this one is because two reasons. One, I did not wrap it properly, so the fletching itself is actually coming loose. Two is I've actually hit underneath this with another dart. So that helped create another gap, or more of a gap. So the things you'll need is fletching material, preferably feathers. Turkey feathers work really great. Goose feathers. Another thing to keep in mind whenever you are fletching is making sure that they are both either right side of the bird or left side of the bird, because of the helical pattern. If you have both the same helical, you can actually help create more of a twist, helping the flight path a little bit. Okay, you'll need a lighter. I use Dacron. You can use artificial sinew. It's basically the same thing. I just have a whole bunch of Dacron on hand, so I just use Dacron. Okay, then I use a blade. You can use your knife if it's sharp enough. You can use scissors if you want. Pretty much whatever that will cut it safely for you will work. So what I like to do is I like to start with the back of the fletch first. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut that off. Okay, so as you can see, I cut it. Now I'm just simply going to remove the previous wrapping, and we'll go ahead and throw that away. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I can pull both of them tight and parallel to each other, okay? To make sure that I have enough room to work with. Now, I don't like to pull mine super tight just because I feel it's unnecessary. It could help you if you're out in the field just to make sure that they are on there good. But for my purposes, I seem to be doing just fine. Okay? Then what I like to do is I like to cut about a wingspan. It gives me more than I need, but it's plenty to work with. So then I go ahead and cut the wingspan length off. Okay. I want to keep in mind which direction I want to wrap. For instance, if I want to wrap towards the knock or away from the knock. Okay. Now, if I was doing an arrow, I would do towards the knock, just because if it were to penetrate, it would help tighten that fletching up. If it were to go all the way to the fletching. Not completely necessary to think about that, but I like to think about that. Now, there's a reason why, because the way I wrap is gives it a cleaner look. So I make a loop with one end, just simply a loop, so that you can see both ends. The longer end keeps going, and then I have the loop closed. Okay, and then depending on which way I'm wrapping will depend on if I put the loop towards the knock or away from the knock. I will go ahead and put it towards the knock, so that I will wrap towards the knock. Okay, now you want to start wrapping just the material that you are using to wrap, just to kind of keep it in place. Now it helps to have a little bit of a wiggle room whenever you're doing this. That's why I'm doing it outside, is because I have more wiggle room. So I just do two two times around just to help keep everything in place. Then I'll start wrapping on the actual fletching. Now, when I'm doing this, I want to make sure that the fletching is in the proper placement that I want. So then I will go ahead and kind of do one wrap just for that one, just to help keep it in place. Then I will go over to the other one and make sure that it is parallel to that, see? Then I will go ahead and wrap that one down in that place. Okay, and then now you can see that we have a good tight bond. Okay, now I will just continue wrapping this until I get the desired thickness of the wrapping that I want. Okay, now while I'm doing this, I'm trying to keep the strand that I am wrapping right next to the previous strand that I already wrapped. That helps keep everything looking nice and smooth and tight. And I'll just keep wrapping it until I either run out of cordage, which I don't think I will, or until I finish wrapping, meaning that I wrap the full length that I want to. Okay, so I do about 1/4 of an inch or 3/4 of an inch to almost a full inch, just to make sure that everything is nice and tightly bonded together. Now, it is necessary for you to do this almost as tight as possible. You don't want to put too much strain on the Dacron right now, but you do want to make sure that it's nice and tight as you are going around. So I like to keep my index finger on the opposite side of my thumb. With my thumb, I like to keep pressure down onto the actual Dacron. And then with my other 3 fingers, I like to keep tension between my thumb and index finger, just so I have more tension that way. And it kind of helps feeding as you wrap. Now, as you wrap, the loop will move over whichever way you are wrapping, whether that's clockwise or counterclockwise. It's not that important right now. Now, what I'll do is I have a little bit excess sticking out of one of the fletchings, so I'll just cut it off with my blade. Okay. So then I'll do another couple wraps just to kind of make sure that I go past that a little bit. Okay. There. Now what I want to do is I want to feed what I was just wrapping with through the loop. Okay. Like so. And then I will pull on the strand on the other end. And that will start strengthening the loop, pulling the other end down into the wrap. And I go about halfway. If you can see it, there's a little bit of a bulge, and that's where the 2 loops actually kind of form a simple overhand knot. Okay, then I cut off the excess with my blade. Then we'll throw that away. I like to keep the longer strand, just because you never know when this length might come in handy. And then the nice thing about the Dacron or the artificial sinew is that it does shrink when heated. So I use the lighter to gently go over my wrapping, shrinking shrinking the wrapping slightly. You don't want to melt the wrapping. You just kind of want to create a little bit of a tension in there. And it'll be warm, but I touch it just to make sure that everything is nice and tight. Okay, now it's not necessary that I do the other side just because I do have enough tension in there. But you would just repeat the same steps for the other side. And that is it. That is how you wrap a fletching. Now, if you want to do a spiral wrapping, like this dart here, like this dart, so that you have a strand that just spiral wraps down this. What I do is I do the same thing I just did for the bottom one. Then I take a single strand, tie it off using a square knot at the base, which is just 2 overhand knots, which is the first knot you tie whenever you're tying your shoe, just that knot twice. Okay, then I will go in and I will spiral it as I go down, making sure that I get the proper spacing. You can see I didn't right here, so a piece of the fletching is actually sticking out because I didn't create the proper gap. But then you'll just go down, you'll tie another square knot up here, then you'll do the same wrapping as you did before, and then that's it. I did that with this one just because the spine or quill of the actual feather was a little bit thinner than I liked, so the feather actually started curling. So I did this to keep it down. Okay? And that is how you fletch an Atlatl dart. Or you can use the same method for a arrow. Okay? So now I will show you that the dart actually does work. That the fletchings won't come off in midair. Okay? Alright. Okay, now I will show you how to do a FLUFLU fletching, okay, with faux fur. Now, the only reason why I'm using faux fur is because it is a relatively inexpensive way for me to make FLUFLU darts. Now, I pick up my faux fur from Hobby Lobby or Walmart, just because they tend to have pretty good deals on that. You could pick it up from Joann's, or Joann's, yeah, Joann's, or any other fabric store or craft store. Okay. Now, I'm taking the duct tape fletchings off of this dart for the purpose of putting on the FLUFLU. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll just remove the duct tape fletching with the blade again. Okay, now be sure to not cut towards yourself or make that gesture because you could stab yourself. Okay, now I'm just going to simply cut and remove the duct tape fletching. Now this might take me a while. Alright, so I have the duct tape fletching mostly removed now. Now, after a while, duct tape does tend to not lose its grippiness, but the grippiness sometimes stays onto the actual part that you want it to stay onto, like it's supposed to. But when removing this does not make this fun. Okay? What I do is I simply just take my knife or blade, whatever I'm using, to just simply scrape up as much of that off as I can. Okay? Now, if I can't get all of it, sometimes I'll use a lacquer. That works really well, removing it. Just put some of that on a cloth, and then rub it down, and then it should come off really well. Or a paper towel. That seems to work too. Now I'll just use the blade because it works relatively easy. Okay, so I do not recommend using duct tape fletchings, although if they're the cheapest and easiest thing that you can do, go right ahead. Just know that later on down the road you might have to remove it and it might not be so fun. But for a beginner that's just starting out making his own stuff, duct tape's probably the easiest and cheapest way to go about doing fletchings. Although I did see at Hobby Lobby when I was there last, they had turkey feathers that were dyed. Now, I can't say anything about the quality of the turkey feathers for fletching material, but they were indeed turkey feathers. I think they came in a 10-pack for $3. So that could be a viable option if you have a Hobby Lobby near you. Okay. Other craft stores might have turkey feathers that you can use as fletchings. You might even be able to buy turkey feathers online too. I don't know about that because I've never done that myself. Now, as I keep scraping this duct tape gunk off, I want to keep in mind to not take off too much of the wood, just because if I do take off too much of it, that can change the spine of the dart a little bit. Just something to keep in mind while you are doing stuff like this that is changing the dart. Okay. So I have taken off most of the duct tape gunk. There are a few spots in here that still have it, but for our purposes, it'll be fine just leaving it on there. Now, there are parts in here where the knife or blade did catch a little bit, and that shouldn't take too much of the spine out, especially since we will be putting glue down. Little knife chunks, as long as they're little, shouldn't affect the flight path or structural integrity of the actual dart. Okay, now the next thing I will do is I will go ahead and I will cut about a foot section or 8 inches section of faux fur, about ½ an inch wide. I'll go ahead and show you how I do that. Here I have some faux fur that I bought. It's just maybe 1.5 inches long, the fur is. Now I have a section where I previously cut a strip off. Now you want to keep in mind the growth or grain of the faux fur. And then you want to cut closely to the fabric part of the fur instead of keeping the scissor all the way open and going. You want to keep as much of it as closed as possible. And then Normally I would trace out a pattern that I wanted, just so that I knew that I was keeping it close. But for this, I find that it's not necessary for you to be that accurate. So you just get a strip like so of faux fur. Now that we have our strip of faux fur cut, I went ahead and got some glue out. Now this is just, it's called jewelry glue. It's supposed to be shockproof. I don't know. This is pretty much the only glue that I had on hand. Super glue would probably work. Hot glue gun would probably be a little ideal. Now the thing is, you want to start to kind of clean off the strip, where the fabric actually meets the fur. And then once you got that relatively clean, you kind of want to make sure that there's no dirt or grime on here. Cleaning it would probably be a little ideal. Then you want to make sure that you know where you want to start the wrap. Now this is about a foot of faux fur strip, and that's a little bit wider than half an inch, but it does the trick. Now that'll provide about a 6 or 8 inch fletch. Okay. Now what I like to do is, where I will start the fletching is I'll put some glue on there. And this stuff kind of stinks, so I like to do it outside. So I put a fair amount just in a circle around the base. Then I kind of do little consecutive circles around it just so I can get a fair amount on the base of it. Then I'll set it down. Then what we want to do is we want to start wrapping just at an angle. It doesn't really matter if it's the same angle. As you start wrapping, it'll make more sense. Then you want to try to keep the fur out of the area that you are gluing. Then what I like to do is I like to put glue on the strip itself instead of on the actual dart. Seems to keep it less messy. This will get messy. If you are working with a super glue or something that you cannot have the glue touch your hands, wear gloves while you are doing this. And ideally you don't want to set this down on something that it'll leak onto that you don't want it to. Now I use my breath as a good determining factor to keep the faux fur out of the glue, but you can use your hands. Since I don't have enough hands, I tend to use my breath a little bit more. And then you just kind of start wrapping at an angle on your way up. And you just try to keep it kind of symmetrical as you go. It's not going to be perfect, but that's why you're using faux fur, because this will help cover up mistakes. Now sometimes I do put a little bit of glue on the actual dart as I'm going, if I'm getting closer to my hand, because it seems to make more sense to me that way. So now I ran out of the area of glue that I put on the strip, so now I will actually put glue on the shaft of the dart instead. Now if you're dealing with a nozzle like this, you'll probably get faux fur onto the nozzle. You'll want to clean that off later. Okay, and then you have your dart. Now, what I like to do is kind of press everything down, make sure it's sticking real well. Then I'll go one way with the fur, and I'll go the other way. Just kind of help it to start forming and help loosening the hairs that you cut, because you will lose some of these hairs. The more you use it, the more you shake it, spin it, you'll loosen those hairs. Now, I like to give it a couple really good spins. If you want to make it look pretty, you can take a knife and just clean up the edge, just to make it more of a defined cylindrical line than the kind of jagged as you can see here. You kind of have a jagged look of where the piece wrapped. I find it doesn't really make that much of a difference if you do or do not. I tend to leave it on there because it's just less work. Okay, so now I will throw it and show you that it works. You're going to want to give the glue some time to dry. As far as I know, I think this is a quick setting glue, so I should be just fine. If you're using a slow acting epoxy, like a hour or 24-hour epoxy, which would work, you're just going to want to wait a good long while, or at least long enough for the glue to set before you start messing with the actual FLUFLU, like that, or doing this, just kind of abusing it, because you will lose hairs, and that is totally fine. So here we have the Atlatl dart that I just fletched with the FLUFLU. We have the mark on it so that I know which way to put it up, and the spur. And now for the test shot. Works just fine. The spine isn't for this Atlatl, which is totally fine. Okay, so that is how you wrap, both with feather fletchings and FLUFLU fletchings with faux fur. Okay, I'll see you later.